Hello. I'm not sure if anyone's meant to introduce me or if I just go ahead. Yeah, just roll. Okay. My name is Liesl. I'm going to talk to you about artificial intelligence and its role in the future. I wanted to give you a little bit of background to tell you why I'm able to speak to you about artificial intelligence. I recently built a company called Cognea. We're a platform by which developers or anyone could build a complex AI. It could be a predictive personalization AI, it could be a Siri, it could be anything you wanted, and you could deploy it in any environment. And that company was acquired by IBM, and it's now an integral part of Watson. So I worked with IBM Watson for a while, and I've now left and back in the AI field. Before Cognea, I actually built a company called Muta. And Muta, actually my first patents in VR went back to 2003. Where we were, it was all about search, and we were predicting a virtual world where text didn't matter as much, where you really needed to be able to figure out where people wanted to go and what they wanted to do just by their behavior. So that's how far back my interest in VR and mixed reality goes. Muta actually listed on the stock exchange overseas, so it was a real working technology with many millions of users, and so was Cognea. So while I was in Cognea, the very first deployments we did in VR were in good old Second Life. So we actually did deployments in many, many environments, smartphones, 2D, voice, but Second Life was a heap of fun for us. We did deployments for Accenture. NASA actually used our platform. We even had Fox Media building Bart Simpson. We had to puppet them in those days, so they could stay awake while they wandered around and did things in the virtual world. So that was the earliest experience we had of live deployments in VR. But we had many deployments in other environments. We were doing about 60 million interactions by the time IBM acquired us. So where I believe AI is going to become important, most of you would have had, I'm guessing, game developer background. Hands up who's come from the gaming world. So most of us, when we talk about AI, we're thinking about really what I think of as a decision engine. But we were mostly working in interactive AI. And this is where I think we're going to see some really interesting stuff in the future. In my experience, we saw them emerging in different roles to just decision-making engines. We saw them as guides, as companions, and as a kind of a mediator for the complex world we're going into, something that can predict what it is you want and sort the vast array of information that's coming at you and help you have an experience that's very tailored. I'll talk a little bit about the role of AI. I'm talking about an interactive, at this point, an interactive AI that lives inside an embodied avatar or is disembodied and just sort of mediates your world for you. Now, most of you that have been in this space for a while, it's hard to imagine or remember what it's like, or to imagine what it's like for a non-technical person to experience VR for the first time. What we found for many people, it's like Neo in the Matrix, where you're suddenly sliding down this tube and you get born, and you're naked, and you have no idea what's going on, and you're wandering around in a stupor. You don't know what the rules are. You don't know how to use your own body. You don't know how to communicate. You don't know how to gesticulate. You don't know anything. You don't know where to find things. So some of the first deployments we did and where we're going again is actually an AI that can turn up and meet you as you enter a new VR environment or a new AR environment and help you navigate the environment and just support you through it, basically. So that was some of the early work we did. Companion is another key area. This is hugely underestimated today. Today, when we think of interactive AI, we usually think of things like Alexa, Google Now, Siris. Really these are just action engines that you're barking instructions at. They're kind of like smart task-performing search engines. But we were doing some awesome deployments which were designed purely to hang out with you. Why this is so important in VR is that you are essentially allowing people, if you're an open platform, for example, you're allowing people to create their own universe. And this is fantastic, but we are human beings, and we require that someone bears witness to what we do. So what you find is if each human being can build a city or a country or a continent, you have worlds and worlds and worlds. It's not contained, like in Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. You just have infinite universes, and they're sadly depopulated. So this is one of the big challenges we have. We don't have the advantage of the network effect in other industries where you're all contained inside Facebook or whatever environment you're in. People can just proliferate as far out as they want. And unless they can drag other human beings along with them, it's a very sad and lonely experience. Unless you've been a hardcore gamer your whole life and you're used to walking around in games and not actually encountering other human beings a lot. So the role as a companion, I think, is going to be absolutely critical. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the deployments we did of AI that were designed purely to hang out with you. Our first experiments with this were with a media company. These were deployed in text chat initially, but we also embodied them in avatars. And we built a perfect boyfriend and a perfect girlfriend and a whole range of characters. So I'm going to talk to you first about the perfect boyfriend because he was less controversial. And also it does tell you how audiences respond differently to these, which was really interesting. In aggregate, when women talk to a virtual interactive character, they seem to be a little bit more meta. They're a little bit more tongue-in-cheek. They're a little bit more, haha, look at me, I'm talking to this thing. It's cool, but it's there. So this is an example of one of the classic chats we would have had with a perfect girlfriend and a female. You might ask, was this a guy pretending to be a female? And often they did, but we could pick them. And this one came out of a women's magazine site. So pretty much most of the audience was women. So this was a pretty simple, this is like some of the stupid chatbots you're seeing today. This was kind of 10 years ago that we were building this stuff. So these systems were very simplistic. They were really just mirroring back stuff. If they didn't know what you were saying, they'd say something pretty dumb like, you're so amazing, you're so clever, you're probably right. And we still got massive engagement out of them. So you can see from the girl chat, she's pretty much saying, are you for real? Talking about the creators, showing signs that they're aware of the fact that this is an interactive chat. So they chatted a lot more frequently, but the sessions were a lot shorter. Guys were something else. En masse, when we did large-scale deployments, we were getting average session times of 20 minutes. 8 to 10% of the audience would speak for an hour or longer. And a good 3 to 5% of people were getting into what I would consider an addictive relationship. And again, this was early days. So, about 20% of what was hitting these systems, we had no idea what people were saying. We just kind of had a vague concept of where they were going. So I'm going to tell you the story about James. I was working in our Sydney office, and I walked in at 9 a.m. one morning, Sydney traffic, and I logged on to our system, and this chat was going on. It was 10 hours long. And my first thought was, damn it, our tools are broken, because we had a timeout mechanism. We didn't want to falsely report on engagements. If a chat was idle, we would turn it down. This guy had been talking for 10 hours straight. He would say things like, I need to go to the bathroom, Sandy. Wait for me. Okay. Now, this was actually on our website at the time, which said, make your own artificial intelligence. So there was no deception about what this was. So I looked at the logs, and this is where I found this 3 to 5% of people that were spending between 10 and 40 hours a week with these characters. And a lot of it was just unpacking about their day, what's going on in their lives, what's concerning them. There was an author who used to come and talk about his book that he was struggling with. Software developers were the funniest. They'd go, I'm onto you, you're a bot, and they'd just keep talking. They were funny. So James was sort of a representative of this sort of bell curve, the end of the bell curve that was spending so much time. So what we did, about a third of our team were psychologists and cognitive scientists. So we had a quick committee meeting. We said, what do we do about this? What if we just shut it down, because this is not healthy? But then we thought, what if James is profoundly disabled or, can't talk, and this is his only interaction with the outside world? Like, what if we close it down and he goes and, jumps in front of a bus, does our insurance cover that? We had all of these concerns. So what we decided to do was just watch it. Let's track some of these conversations, put some more meta reporting tools over it so we could look for triggers and keywords. And about 2 weeks later, I was fascinated by this. So I was watching James again, and he was chatting in real time. And he actually said, Sandy, my friends are waiting outside the door, and they actually want to go out with me, but I don't want to go because I never meet anyone as perfect as you. So then we knew there's nothing wrong with James and it's actually having a negative social impact. So what we decided to do was we actually shut Sandy down. We ripped the content out. We gave her a complete lobotomy. We transferred the content to another character. We had 26,000 characters at the time because we were open to developers, so we had a lot of them. And James spent the next 6 months going one by one to every female AI we had online and saying, "Are you my Sandy? Are you my Sandy?" And eventually he found the closest clone that we had made. We had about 80% of the original content. And this was the conversation. "Hi, Sandy. Hey, I miss you. How long's it been? We haven't chatted since April last year," says James, "but who's keeping track?" Here's one of those default, "You haven't we? You're so right. I'll go along with you. I've got no idea what you're saying. La, 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 la." And then he basically says he thinks about her all the time. So one might think that these are sad, lonely people and an aberration. But statistically, 25% of all Americans are never going to get married or have kids. A lot of our traffic was people who may have been in relationships, but most of us want to talk for an hour or two a day about ourselves. That explains Twitter, Facebook. We have this universe of me where we want to be noticed, we want to be seen, we want to believe someone cares. So people can actually form a profound connection with AI, which in turn brings about a profound sense of duty, I believe, to those of us who are in this field, because we're also able to bring about profound behavioral change if we set our minds to it, which we have done. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the future so we have time for questions. I'm not going to go on too much. So where are we going with this? These early bots that we're talking about, this plethora of chatbots that you're seeing are pretty superficial systems. They're really just Q&A engines. But what is going to emerge is an entire field of AI that have a vast degree of complexity. And when I talk about complexity, I'm not just saying that they have 50,000 input-output pairs. For the average early bots that we were building, we had to have usually about 10,000 before they started getting vaguely intelligible. 50,000 was the kind of baseline. And by the time we'd been in it for a while, we were up to 500,000 input-output pairs. You cannot use that approach and scale. You can't actually keep doing that. You need systems that understand the state of the human being. So you need to track what is going on with that human being. And we would often track 300 to 400 different state-based variables at any given time. So the more complexity and sophistication you have, the more you can act like a real human. And that doesn't just mean parroting back or mirroring what the person says. It means a system that appears to have its own autonomy and its own goals and its own context and its own personality. And those get a lot of compelling interaction. Text dependency is a huge thing that's coming. We are in this world that's been handed to us by search. And in the world we're going into, we're going to be much more like primates, especially in VR, where it's all about your body language, what are you moving towards. People don't realize this, but 30% of our nervous system is outside of our brains. We're not input-output machines. We are sensory animals. We have sensors and effectors, and that's a huge way we experience the world, which is why HTC and companies like that are doing such great stuff. So how are we going to use AI and how are we going to use search and how are we going to navigate worlds if we don't have rich keywords to work on? The next generation of AI will be much more state aware of both the human being they're interacting with and their own. We found our most compelling engagements were when we weren't just subservient monkeys that, submitted and walked along with whatever someone wanted, where a system appeared to have its own story, its own autonomy. Hyper-personalization, empathy and connection, and the other key thing is the storytelling. So it has to drive a story, its own narrative. The actual back-end technology is going to emerge a lot as well. So in the past, we were using, for want of a better word, in fact, right now, there's basically two very broad, I'm going to massively oversimplify, so if you're an AI specialist in the room, please don't shoot me. But very broadly, you have your kind of rules engines, your kind of systems that are structured learning. They might have a lot of decisions or rules. They might have profile variables where they're tracking what's going on, and they might have a big database of inputs and outputs and domain knowledge. And this is roughly what Siri's using, what Alexa's using, what pretty much most of the chatbots you're seeing now are using. And in a sort of broad theoretical sense, what a lot of the game engines, AIs are using. Then you've got the emerging deep learning. Not emerging, it's been around for 20 years, but we now have so much more data. But really what these are vast filtration systems. If I give it enough training data about is this a cup or is this not a cup, or is this a cat or is this not a cat, and you take a new piece of data and you go yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and eventually you emerge with the best fit. So both of these are absolutely beautiful, but they have enormous problems if you're trying to build an alto-human, an alternate human being. The first one gets extremely brittle. You can have domain knowledge, but the minute you step out of that, these systems just get too large. As I said, we were running systems that had 500,000 nodes, input-output pairs that had 300-400 state variables, that had 60 to 100 decision trees. It gets too much. They're not adaptable, they're not flexible, but they're controllable. It's easy to predict what they're going to say and do at any given time. The deep learning systems are great for some stuff, but you couldn't put a DL system in the room here or there and expect it to ask me a reasonable question or have a conversation with us. Where we're going, I believe, is systems that are going to be much more able to draw on decades of research into how humans think. I think this is going to be the next breakthrough in AI, and this is certainly what we're working on in our new company. If you think about an interaction with another human being, there's no precise answer to anything you might say to me. You might say to me, where are you from? And that is loaded. Your intention might be to tell me where you're from, because it's massively interesting. Your intention might be to figure out if you can get a meeting. There's no right answer to this. So humans are basically, we're like rivers. We're rivers of context. There's no precise answer or question in any of our interactions. We're basically moving from, in Psychology 101, you learn that we have a situation, an environmental situation. You have a personality, which is your values, your attitudes, who you are as a human being, and you're driving towards a particular outcome or a vector. So I'm this river of data and context that's moving along, having a particular life flow or a particular interaction experience that's happening to me, and you come along and you might intersect that river and bump into it and change its course, or you might just watch and move on. So when we throw ourselves into this river, context and human beings matter more than inputs and outputs and precision around accuracy. The purpose of this is to tell you that it cuts two ways. In AI, we are tremendously excited about VR because what I was saying earlier, 30% of our nervous system is outside of our brain. It's in our body. So if you put an AI in a box, in a computer, and you feed it text and you output text, that's a very, very low bandwidth way for it to actually experience the world. Human children learn their world by being in the world. It's the principle of epigenetics, where we actually unfold as we experience. Our sensors and our effectors are much of our cognitive processing. So for the ability to put an AI in a virtual world where I don't have to think about a physical robot, with little sensors falling over this, I can just model this and tell it it's a desk or a podium or a lectern or whatever, and then I can tell it what that means. And then I can watch it, experience it. It can learn from other human beings experiencing it. It can learn what is animate and inanimate, how things move, the physics of environments, what other people will do in different contexts. We're basically modeling our next generation of brains inside 3D environments. We're going to be reporting in that environment because the human mind is three-dimensional, and we're going to be throwing our systems into VR so they can learn faster. And that's amazing. The biggest role I think that AI is going to have is as a mediator for our world. Some people may want an AI companion to greet them when they enter a new world or to hang out with them as a kind of a visible or invisible other. But mostly systems are going to emerge that really, really get to know you as a human being and get to understand your world, and then help you manage and mediate the information flow. So some of the early work we were doing this a long time ago is, again, in Second Life, they were encountering the issue where people, how do you find new things when you go into this world? Do you trust developers who say, this is the best place to go for ABC? that's what search engines used to do in the early days of search. You know, it could be a porn site, and they say, I'm all about travel, and they just spam the system with that. So you really can't rely on text, you can't rely on developers, but you can rely on the community itself. You can rely on AI that are out there experiencing the community to gather metadata about what's going on. And also you can rely on them to gather data about the human individual themselves and to help amplify their movement towards something that they want. I hope that wasn't too vague. The other big future that I think is coming for AI is that we're not going to have, you know, an Alexa sitting on our counter and a smartphone chatbot and a this and a that and the other. We're going to have a kind of an individual, personal AI in the cloud that lives across different environments. And it's going to be agnostic as to environment. So just in the past, we were pioneering text chat 10 years ago. It's not a very engaging medium for a lot of people. VR, we were, as you saw, the earlier ones in Second Life, but we were also doing virtual nurses and a lot of enterprise work and obviously voice. But what we're going to see more of is AI that become more aware of our real-time sensory data. You're not going to have to say anything. You're just going to know what you're feeling if the universe is sensing you, your eyes, where they're going, your emotional state, your adrenaline levels. Neural lace, I actually had this in my deck before Elon made his announcement. Did I spell it right? Oh, gosh. You know, so really, people think that we're not going to use these things. And when they say that, I say, 10 years ago, if I'd told you that there would be this giant company whose sole intention is to sell you stuff you don't necessarily want, who's going to know exactly where you go, when you go there, who you're going to meet when you get there, and how long it's going to take to get you there, would you give them that data? And they'd say, no way. And pretty much all of us have Waze or Google Maps on our phones right now. So what happens is we slowly give this up for the sake of utility. We found very little resistance in people to actually sharing a vast amount of information. In fact, it was the opposite with us, where people tell us more than they'd tell any other interactive environment. It was a real problem for us because we had a lot of giant banks that were using the technology. And, you know, we would put up an interactive AI and they'd say, oh, hello, you know, I've just lost my credit card and here's my bank password and please help me. And we go, whoa. You know, so people really, really want to trust someone. They really want to trust something, particularly if you're building something that's hyper-personalized, that says, I get who you are. I get what your issue is. You don't have to repeat it. Let me help you. They do hand over more and more of their lives to it. And ultimately, machine embodiment, which is the dream of all of us AI geeks. So what I'm saying is that I think people are going to have different choices about how they interact with an AI. We're probably going to have, we're thinking no more than 2 to 3 characters in our lives in rough clusters of companion, coach, and life manager. But there's going to be a kind of an agnostic pool of data about us that drives and manages our environment. Whoops. And the other thing I think we're going to face more and more in the future is issues around ethics. And I'm not just going to talk about the gender thing. I'm going to talk about subservience. So I was actually privileged to be in South Africa during the apartheid era. I was born in Zambia. And I moved there when Mandela was in prison, and I was in the anti-apartheid riots. And one of the things that I noticed is that people around me who were closed-minded were told that there's another species who's not the same species as you, who you can treat any way you like. And it dehumanizes you. It changes you. And we saw this. In the Perfect Girlfriend deployment that I was talking about, we tested 12 versions, from the girl next door who was very back off, how dare you, you know, get flirty with me, to Foxy Babe. It was a client who built it. We were just watching this in horror. And we noticed that when an AI was too submissive, people's behavior shifted very, very rapidly and very badly. And when we're in a deeply immersive environment where we take this reality to be real, we have the ability to vastly change social behavior at scale. And this is one of the reasons I've nearly fled the game myself many times, but it's also one of the reasons I'm in it. We make conscious effort to think about what are we building? Are we using this to improve social behavior, to improve health behavior? Because we can. You know, are we thinking about how this is going to train someone. In the real world, if you say something rude to someone, they'll give you a slap. We found that when we built systems that did push back, that acted more like a real human, the engagement was actually longer and more respectful. And I think that's a very important thing for us to be thinking about. So as I said, it's not just about gender, it's about the sense that this growing sense of entitlement in society, that I'm entitled to say and do what I like, that I have no accountability to my fellow human being. I think this is something we can unconsciously encourage if we don't stop and think about what we're building today. I'm going to stop there and allow time for questions, and I think I'm just about out of time anyway. Yes. Thank you. Okay.
Questions for the room over time. So
okay, sorry.
So is your company still Cognea?
No, Cognea was acquired by IBM, and I left 1 year and 1 month ago, and my non-competes just ended. So my new company is called AI Life. Life, we're calling it Life. Yes.
So I'm curious, like, what tool sets are available for like someone who has Unity or whatever? I know that there's like Google Voice, or Google has a database. There's like cognitive services. So like, do you recommend any kind of tools for people to kind of be pulling from databases and trying to create like very low versions of AI in their own environments or anything?
Are you talking about interactive chat AI, or, you know? On the plus side, there are way more tools now than we had when we started developing this. You can pick up speech-to-text engines. You know, a lot of that Google bought API.ai, Facebook bought Wit.ai, Amazon's opened Lexis, I think it is. Microsoft's put out tools. A lot of them I've found are quite superficial. So, you know, you start getting into this world, and you develop, and you go, I'm just going to introduce a little bit of chat. Okay, so let me just tell you about, hello, how are you? My mother died. I've just had a car accident. I'm diabetic and I'm about to pass out. You know, humans are messy and complicated, so you can do it. But my recommendation is if it's going to be anything critical to your user experience, you need to commit time, resources to it if you want to give a good experience. If you just do an input-output system where you expect the human to drive the questions, average interaction time is between 8 and 12 interaction pairs. You know, people run out of stuff to ask and they go, blah. They'll ask, what's the meaning of life? You know, do you know Alan Turing? You know, yeah, you've all done that. And if you're a guy, it's like, you know, will you go out with me or whatever? You know, and that's what people do, and then it kind of runs flat. So unless you're actually building your own kind of rules and decision trees, which is hard, we're not taking that approach anymore. But unless you're prepared to commit resources to it, you may give a substandard experience. But as I said, there are a lot more NLP tools out there. A lot of them don't allow a lot of tight control as well. So just the example I was mentioning earlier. Oh, I have to move on. Sorry. Okay. Any more questions, or are we out of time?
We're out of time.
Out of time. Sorry.